Hey, welcome to a new episode of Nate's MMA Corner. I'm Nate, and if you watch my show, you're in my corner. Today's episode is a post-fight show for UFC 204, Bisping versus Henderson 2 for the UFC Middleweight Championship of the World. And this main card just was amazing top to bottom. You had good guys, bad guys duking it out to save the world and the fate of mankind. And the whole MMA world as we know it. Anyways, yeah, so it's pretty big stuff, pretty drastic, and it took place in Manchester, England. Yeah, so this is a post-fight show, the main card, and let's get started. So, the pay-per-view started off in the featherweight division with Mirsad Bektic versus Russell Dome. And as expected, this was pretty much a squash match. But before Russell Dome got squashed, he landed a couple good shots on Bektic where it looked like, oh, whoa, you know, maybe Dome has a chance here. But that lasted for like a few seconds, in my opinion. And yeah, on my fantasy picks, and if you look at the description for my pre-fight show, I put Bektic by first round submission. I just had a gut feeling that he would at some point get it to the ground because Dome is a decent striker, but he's only a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, so his submission skills are real limited, and Bektic would capitalize off that. And it was, yeah, submission rear naked choke, 4 minutes 22 seconds into the first round. So yeah, it was pretty dominant on the ground, and it was a blowout. And yeah, Bektic worked in that rear naked choke fairly easily. It didn't take very long. It wasn't like he was spending the whole round trying to work it and get it in there. It was just the last half of the first round he was working for a little bit, and he got in there, and that was it. So yeah, Mirsad Bektic, I think, rightfully deserves a top 10 or top 15 opponent in the featherweight division in his next fight. He's undefeated. Not only in the UFC, but his whole MMA career, pro MMA career right now. So, good job, Mirsad Bektic. He's looking good. He could be a hero to the Bosnian fan base for the UFC. So, keep that in mind. And then, yeah, the second fight on the main card was in the heavyweight division, as some of you know, my favorite weight class in the whole sport. And it was Stefan Skyscraper Struve versus Daniel Omielanczuk. I believe I said that right. Yeah, Daniel Omielanczuk. I'll just say Daniel. Okay, we know who I'm talking about. Okay, so Daniel, he's short for a heavyweight. He's about 6 foot. He's kind of stocky. He's like another Jeff Monson type build. And you know, he has heavy hands like Jeff Monson, and yeah, Daniel landed some decent shots on Stefan. Stefan should have been more careful in the stand-up, having his killer Dutch striking skills. And yeah, but Stefan, he rocked him and then took him to the ground. And then second round, rocks him and takes it to the ground and then submits him. And it was a submission Darce choke. It was really good Darce choke. Good technical ground game of Stefan Struve. Stefan Struve has highly underrated ground game. I was hanging out with a buddy watching this fight, and I told him, I said, hey, look, Stefan has underrated ground game. You want to keep that in mind. And sure enough, he gets submission round 2, Darce choke. So good job, Stefan Struve. Building up those wins and really getting back on track after all the health issues he had. I'm really happy for Stefan Struve. He's one of my favorite heavyweights, one of the nice guys you'll ever meet. Then in the light heavyweight division on this amazing main card, we had Jimmy Manuwa versus Ovin St. Preux. Now, like a lot of people, I picked Ovin St. Preux to win this fight. And this was the only fight that I got wrong on the main card. I was pretty blown away by the punching power of Jimmy Manuwa. I thought that Ovince St. Preux would just kind of avoid the stand up and look to get some takedowns and look to do some dirty groundwork on Jimmy. However, that game plan didn't work out too well, assuming he had that game plan. But yeah, Jimmy Manuwa, KO punches. It was round 2, 2 minutes 38 seconds. Yeah, Jimmy Manuwa, like, he found his range by the end of that first round, I think. And then the second round, he was starting to really show some improvement in striking with OSP. And then OSP looked just kind of lost, and then you see Jimmy land a shot that just kind of stuns OSP. Then all of a sudden, he's on the ground, and Jimmy's just pounces on him, and the ref pulls him off, and he has a victory. And you saw, from what I could see, OSP's eyes rolled to the back of his head. It was a pretty big knockout. And yeah, Jimmy Manuwa, top 10 light heavyweight. He's a couple wins away from a title shot at this point, in my opinion, because you had OSP, who just fought for interim belt not too long ago, fighting Jimmy, and so Jimmy beats him. That puts him a match or two away from a title shot at this point. Yeah, Jimmy Manuwa's only had 2 losses, so I mean that says a lot. And the guys he's lost to, there's no shame in losing to. So yeah, this is a really good light heavyweight division we're looking at right now. A lot of talent. You got Anthony Johnson versus DC for the belt, and I think that fight could go either way with this rematch. And then Jimmy Manuwa's right there in title mix now, so I'm really happy with Jimmy Manuwa's performance, and I hope he does good in his next couple matches. So this was a great fight in light heavyweight division, and Jimmy Manuwa is a guy to look out for. I'm telling you all right now. Especially if Jimmy Manuwa's ground game gets even better, then he's going to be even more so the total package. And his heavy hands, I mean, he stunned, we're forgetting that he stunned Alexander Gustafsson in their match way back when. And the way he just knocks out OSP like it was nothing, that's just, and OSP again being a title challenger, that was just amazing knockout, and he got a performance bonus for this knockout too. Then we move on to the co-main event in the middleweight division. Gegard Mousasi versus Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort, future Hall of Famer, in any accolade you want to put him in. And yeah, Vitor Belfort, he's a legend in the sport. Then you got Gegard Mousasi, former Strikeforce light heavyweight champ, cleaning house right now in middleweight in UFC. And it was TKO punches round 2. This was a good, clean win for Gegard Mousasi, who I think's been not looked at enough in this division, because it's just, you got all the big names like Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman in this division, and then they're tied up with their fights. Weidman with Yoel Romero and Souza with Rockhold having their rematch. And Gegard Mousasi needed a big win, and he got a big win over Vitor Belfort. The striking was sort of, Belfort was holding his own, I think, in the striking department in the first round for the most part, but Gegard was working him pretty good in that first round, and then the second round, I think he found his range perfectly and was able to rock him and just tee off on him against the cage there, and it was just an amazing finish for Gegard Mousasi. And Gegard Mousasi, he's still fairly young, has a lot of fights left in him, and he's been fighting for ages, and this guy has 40 wins now, I believe it is. So Gegard Mousasi, underrated ground game as well. Hopefully he's worked on his ground game since the Jacare Souza fight, so if he ever has a rematch Souza, which could happen, he'll be more prepared. So I think this guy could be a title challenger in the near future. And Gegard Mousasi, yeah, he devoured Vitor Belfort, made it look fairly easy. So it was a very impressive win for Gegard Mousasi. Okay, So now we go on to the main event for the UFC Middleweight Championship of the World, with Michael the Count Bisping defending the title against Dan Henderson, future Hall of Famer. This was his last fight, according to him, win or lose. And Michael Bisping did his thing, and if you look at the stats, it was pretty lopsided for Bisping. Some people are like, oh, I had Dan Henderson winning this fight, and some people, know what they saw and go, okay, well, Michael Bisping won this fight. If you check the stats, it was pretty much like Bisping outlanded him round 2, 3, 4, and I believe 5. And about, I want to say, yeah, round 2 was like 40 some odd strikes versus 11. I want to say it was 42 strikes to 11. And sure, Michael Bisping got dropped, and some of those hard strikes were when he got dropped and Henderson was teeing off on him. But it was only for that much of round 2. Round 3 and 4, Bisping clearly outstruck him, found his range. Round 5, Henderson wasn't doing enough. Bisping just a little bit enough to win that round. And round 1 was clearly Dan Henderson. So the judges got it right to some extent. It was 48-47 on 2 of the judges, and then 49-46 for the third judge. And yeah, I think this fight should have been 49-46 across the board for Michael Bisping. I had him winning 4 of the 5 rounds. Basically, yeah, round 2, 3, 4, and 5, and round 1 for Henderson. So this was pretty much entirely striking fest. There wasn't really much for takedown attempts, and this was a great fight. I was really hyped up for this fight going into it, and when this fight was going on, I was like, wow, you know what, I'm on the edge of my seat for this fight. And then when I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, this is one of those fights where the judges could get it wrong, but no, they didn't get it wrong. And if you check fightmetric.com, you can clearly see that Michael Bisping won this fight. So yeah, he gets his first title defense in Manchester, England. Michael the Count Bisping does. And I'm really excited to see who he fights next. Good job, Michael Bisping, if you're watching. And yeah, that wraps up the post-fight show for UFC 204. Stay tuned for my pre-fight show for Ferguson versus Rafael dos Anjos. And yeah, that fight is several weeks away, so that's my next pre-fight show. However, I'll probably do some other episodes of Nate's MMA Corner to kind of fill in a blank so there's not some big layoff. So I'll try to think of some episodes to kind of fill in the space, since there's 4 weeks before the next fight, about 4 weeks. So I'll try to come up with something exciting for you guys to talk about MMA related for this show. And also keep in mind, I have my other show, Nate's Corner, which is about anything but MMA. And maybe I'll do some episodes of that show as well to keep you guys occupied. And, well, that wraps this episode up. And so until then, see ya.